Simon, what have you been up to?
Just waiting for another Rugby World Cup game.
They're going on for a long time, longer even than the election.
It is, yeah. It's true. So I went to get an update on both the campaign and the rugby at the pub last night.
Oh, did you? What sort of reaction did you get?
Questions, lots and lots of questions. And that reminded me that we do actually have quite a few audience questions, so I think we should probably do those, right?
Okay, right. Well, welcome to VoterTorque podcast. This is Heather Roy.
And I'm Simon Ewing-Jarvie. Welcome.
Welcome. So a couple of questions on migration, actually. So I'll read them both out, and then I think we can probably just have a general discussion about that. The first one is from Susie from Dunedin, and she says, blame for the lack of housing seems to be laid at the feet of migrants this election. Surely this is unfair, as there was a housing crisis long before we reopened our borders after COVID. I recall housing being top issues both in the 2017 and 2020 elections. What do you think? So we'll come back to your answer, Susie. And the second question was, we desperately need inward migration because we don't have enough doctors, nurses, engineers for infrastructure projects, bus drivers, hospitality workers, fruit pickers, the list just goes on and on. What's going on here? When did we become a nation who can't take care of our own? That's from the North Shore, from Wirramu. Thanks very much both for those questions. They're
good questions, yeah.
So where do we start?
Well, we can start by acknowledging that New Zealand's population is growing, and quite rapidly, like at about the rate. We're creating a city around about the size of Palmerston North every year.
That's right.
But most of them are going to Auckland.
Yep. And so that just in itself requires, to address Susie's question, really does address the housing issue. I think she's quite right. Housing was right up there with the top priority election topics for 2017 and 2020 elections, so this isn't a new problem, but it does seem to be worse this election.
I think, it's a very emotive subject, migration. I mean, we need to have people coming in. We need to have people with skills coming in. People often get confused between immigrants and refugees.
Yes, they do.
And the latter group needs a lot more help when they arrive, whereas immigrants should have been pre-screened, come with resources, and so on and so forth. So where do you put these people? That's the question. It doesn't matter how they get here. Where do you put them?
Yeah. So do we have a shortage of housing or not is the first question. We've got a lot of houses in New Zealand that aren't lived in. But if everybody is insisting on coming to Auckland and living there, then yes, there's a shortage there.
Yeah, I frequently say there is no housing shortage in New Zealand.
Yeah.
There is just a shortage of houses where people want them.
That's right. Having said that, I'd be the first to say that actually you can't force people to have somebody living in a house that you own if you don't want to. Moving on then to how can we build more houses more quickly? I think the RMA and freeing up land to build more houses is a significant issue. Yeah,
so it's land, infrastructure, houses, house price. The days of 2.5 builders on the site cutting every piece of wood, I think, are limited.
Yep, so there's been significant advances there. The other thing is infill housing. A lot of people are very opposed to that. We still sort of live in this quarter-acre Pavlova paradise, and not everybody wants a quarter-acre section that they have to look after these days, and so infill housing, higher density housing in cities is another solution.
Yeah, right. The other thing, of course, is the professionals you need. Everyone needs a doctor, a dentist, and a school to put your kids in and all that sort of thing. So you need teachers. And I think we forget sometimes that we're part of a global supply and demand situation. There's something I read, over 6 million medical clinicians of various types short in the world. And so why do we think they would specifically want to come to New Zealand? We need to produce more. We need to be attractive to that global movement of people. We also should acknowledge that a lot of people want to go to Australia, and it's easy to get here now and go to Australia as with the pathway to citizenships there.
In the health sector particularly, New Zealand has long been regarded as a place for people to come as a back door to Australia.
And taxi drivers,
Apparently, yeah. So yes, we need more people. Yes, we desperately need more people with particular skills. In the health sector, that's been a problem for a long time, and it's pleasing to see both National and Labour committing to training more doctors and nurses. So that commitment is good. How does the plan roll out? I've not got real clarity around that, but that's something that does need to be addressed. Cyclone Gabriel has been very interesting too. We've got a desperate shortage of engineers and infrastructure staff at the moment because there are huge work streams going on in particular parts of the country, but we are competing with Australia particularly, but also the rest of the world with that skill set. Yep. And we've traditionally relied quite heavily on people coming from the Pacific Islands to do some of that unskilled work. Yep. But Australia also, I'm told, is looking for 450,000 engineer-type workers.
Wow.
At the moment.
You mean construction?
So how do we deal with that? And infrastructure, like the type of skill set we need for the rebuild after Cyclone Gabriel.
Okay. Yeah, so there's no simple answer. The best thing the government can do is remove the barriers and stand well clear. Yep. You can't solve this by a command economy. No, absolutely not. So I think the thing to do, if this is one of your top priority areas, either the housing or the migration, read carefully the party policies on what they're intending to do around that. There's a variety there, but a general acknowledgement, which is pleasing, that we need to deal with the housing both internally and for those people coming into the country. Sadly, we've got more people living in motels now than we did in 2017. Crikey. Okay, that's probably enough on that one. What's the next question, Heather?
So the next question is from Rapika from Tauranga. There always seem to be a few electorates to look out for. Bellwether electorates, I think they're called. You're quite right, Rapika, they are called that. Which ones are they? And are there others we should be looking out for on election night? Yeah, I'm really looking forward to election night. Radio New Zealand have asked me to commentate on their coverage alongside several other people who come from particular philosophical mindsets, so that's really exciting. And I'll be looking out for there's 3 bellwether seats that are described if you do a Google search. They are Hamilton East, Hamilton West, and the Northcote electorates. So maybe we start with those, but there's some other really interesting ones this election too. So Hamilton West, you might recall, had a by-election not that long ago. The National Party MP Tama Potaka, was the person elected there in the by-election. Previously, that election was held by Labour. Dr. Sharma was their MP there, but you might recall that there was a bit of an implosion, and he was edged out of the party, causing a by-election.
Right.
Hamilton East is currently held by Labour MP Jamie Strange. But he's not contesting this election. No,
and David Bennett for National held that seat for a long time.
That's right.
The red wave washed him out.
That's right. So you'll see why these are called bellwether seats. They do come and go depending on the tide of political popularity. And the Northcote electorate has suddenly become very interesting this election because Labour holds that. The MP there is Shannon Hulbert, who has been in the news over bullying allegations in the last week or two.
It's quite interesting that he was accusing Tim van der Molen National of bullying him in the select committee, and Tim van der Molen got ooted on the privileges committee there.
He did.
And now the accuser is the accused.
Yeah, that's right. So last election, Labour took all 3 of those seats, but they do switch back and forth.
Yep.
And so they are seats to look out for. What other seats are interesting, Simon? Which ones do you look to?
I always find the 2 city centrals interesting, Auckland Central and Wellington Central, and they have bounced all over the place in the past. And the fact that the sitting MP is not standing in Wellington Central means it's open to anyone really.
Yeah. So it would have been a really, really exciting election this time had Grant Robertson been running, not just going for the list, but running as a candidate. He's held that seat for several elections now. Nicola Willis actually lives in that electorate, but is standing in Ikaroa, and presumably the thinking was that she wasn't going to beat Grant Robertson, so she would move to the nearby electorate. Robertson then, of course, decided he wasn't standing, but she had committed to Ikaroa. So we've now got other candidates in that seat who seem to be sort of all running neck and neck, National Labour and the Greens.
Yes, it'd be interesting to watch how that pans out. Auckland Central, perhaps less interesting because Chloe Swarbrick's already been there for a term, and Brooke Van Velden having a crack at Tamaki, seeing if they can lift Muldoon's old seat out from underneath O'Connor.
Yeah, I think both Tamaki and Ilam will be interesting because ACT in Tamaki and TOP in Ilam have got very concerted efforts being poured into those two electorates. And can they shift the two national traditional blue seats? Ilam, of course, went red last election, but nobody expects it to stay that way this time.
No.
So two true blue seats, but potentially up for grabs. So I'll be watching very carefully to see what happens in those two on election night.
Hutt South has bounced around a bit. I mean, Trevor Mallard had it for a long time, and then Chris Bishop lifted it when Mallard was Speaker and went to the list.
He did.
And now with the red wave,
Ginny Anderson took that seat, won it from Chris Bishop last time, but Chris Bishop is again having a very concerted effort at that seat, and with a blue tide this time, I think potentially could take it.
Yes, yeah.
But really, I think in their heart, it's probably a red seat. Yeah. But if you just go across the hill, the Remataka Hill, there's the Wairarapa.
Yeah, which has been national longer than it's ever been Labour.
Yes.
And so, yes, I don't see Labour holding that one. McAnulty is on the list as well, but I don't know that he's far enough up the list at the current polling to even make it back.
Yeah. So potentially that one could go back to being a blue seat again.
Yeah. And some of the Māori seats too, interesting. So Mika Whaitari jumped Waka and is standing in her old seat of Ikaroa Rawhiti.
So how's she doing?
She's not coming first.
Is she trailing? Right.
No, she's coming second, but there's I think 6 or 8 points in it, trailing behind the Labour candidate.
Right.
But 30% uncommitted. So who could say?
Yeah. And the other seat that's very important to the Māori Party is
Tai Hauauru,
is Debbie
Ngāti Wapaka, and so there's a 3-way contest there, but National's not really. Hipango's still trailing, and so it's possible that Labour could lift that seat back as well. So it won't change the overall outcome of the election, but it will have a big effect on what happens with the Māori Party if they get 2 or 3% and get one seat. There's an overhang.
Yep. So again, those will all be interesting seats to watch on election night. Yeah. And look, every election I say to people, there is always surprises, one or two surprises that nobody sees coming, black swans, if you like. Yep. And so I think they make election night hugely exciting. Yeah. Okay. What's the last question, Simon? Second to last.
What's going on with ACT? Graham from Invercargill. Why have several of their candidates resigned? Should I be worried that there is a problem with David Seymour?
I think the short answer to that, Graham, is no. There isn't a problem with David Seymour. I think it's hard for the small parties. Firstly, media and the opposite side of the house are always looking for scandal at election time to try and embarrass parties. And when old social media accounts have been gone through, several candidates were found to have made sort of questionable comments, particularly around COVID pandemic time. Personally, I think we need to sort of move on from that time, and lots of people said lots of silly things and people had very firm views in a very unusual environment. Having said that, the ACT Party dealt with them really quickly.
Unlike some other parties who know they've got a few fringe dwellers in their lists.
People who are worried about fringe dwellers should definitely be examining the New Zealand First Party list very closely, because there are a lot of conspiracy theorists there who have said much, much worse things than the ACT candidates did. Winston Peters, I don't think for a moment holds any truck with that sort of view, but he's happy to have those people on his list to attract vote.
From the outside looking in, I remember my own experience of this. You think political parties must be smooth, well-oiled machines, but the reality on the inside is not the case. An electorate committee might be a husband, wife and one neighbour, and they could be old enough not to believe in the internet or to use it, and they have to find a candidate and so on and so forth. So you might say, well, parties should have tools and people that do all this thing. Well, it all takes resources, and they should, but there's a lot of things they should do, and it's actually quite chaotic, and it's not actually that hard to become a candidate.
No, that's true.
I mean, I went from being a volunteer to being a candidate in a matter of weeks, simply because there was no candidate. They went, oh, look at him standing up there talking to us.
That's right. I think the other thing is individual voters should feel some responsibility to do a bit of investigation themselves. Before you vote for a party, give them your party vote, make sure you have a look at that list and see that you're actually content with the people who are there. I think very few people actually scrutinise the lists very carefully at all. And look, the candidates that we're talking about from ACT weren't going to be in positions where they'd be elected. Neither are the ones on the New Zealand First list, but they're still there and they bring a voting base with them. So do check those out. Make sure that you know about the party that you're voting for and that you're happy to do that. It's no good after the event complaining that nobody alerted your attention to it.
True. Righto, what's the last question?
The last question is from James from Hokitika, and James is asking if the VoterTorque podcast series are going to discuss issues like tax, education, health, like we did last election. So he's asking if we're going to do that in future podcasts. Says the policy comparisons were really helpful when I was trying to weigh up who to vote for. Please do this again and soon.
James, yes.
We're coming your way soon.
Thanks for that, mate. We are doing those, but we want to wait until sort of later, closer to the early voting starting, because that's when most of the policies will have been announced, so we get an accurate comparison.
There are still some being rolled out, and if we have that discussion too early, we'll only be painting half the picture, which we don't want to do. Yeah, exactly.
Yesterday.
That was yesterday, So we're looking forward to doing those, looking forward to you listening to them, so please tune in. If you've got any comments for us,
you can send them through. Any questions or comments, go to the TorquePoint website, that's TORQUE, talkpoint.co.nz, go to the contacts page and that'll come straight through to us. Or you can find us on social media.
We'll talk to you again soon. I'm Heather Roy.
And I'm Simon Ewing-Jarvie. Ka kite.